Okay, I'd like to return to Mr. Russell Brand again, but I'm not going to be slagging him off this time. I'm hardly going to mention him because he mentioned on the Jeremy Paxman interview about revolution, although he didn't define it, and I slagged him off for not defining what it is. I've subsequently found out that his idea of a revolution is not my idea of a revolution, but it's more to do with individual change, very mystical, related to Hinduism, Buddhism, esoterica like that, and it's not like burning barricades on the streets and stuff like that, right? So basically, I wouldn't consider what he wanted as a revolution. But all right, I've slagged him off for that. So what do I think a revolution is, and how would it occur, and what would it look like, and so forth? Well, first of all, I don't go for the left-wing version of the revolution being led by the party, because the party is basically a counter-revolution thing. They just want to seize power for themselves, exercise power for themselves, and repress everybody else. That's the left-wing revolution, and we don't want anything like that, a police state, a gulag, or anything like that. No thank you to the Trotskyite, Stalinist, Leninist, Pol Pot revolution. You can hear the police outside. So how would a revolution occur in this country? What would it be like? Well, first of all, I've read a lot about revolutions, the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, revolutions all over the world. I'm an anarchist. I'm interested in revolutions, how they succeed and how they fail, how they start and where they go off course. The initial phases of revolution are always anarchist, they're always spontaneous, they're made by the masses, they're not made by parties. So therefore in England, in Britain, I'd like to talk about how I would envisage a revolution occurring in Britain. Given the fact that Britain is the country of counter-revolution, given the fact there are millions of middle-class people here that love the system, and also millions of morons in the working class that also think that they like the system and wave the Union Jack and say, God save the Queen. But if a revolution did take place in this country, what would it look like? Well, it certainly have absolutely nothing to do with party politics, and it would certainly not be led by or instigated by any of the pathetic left groups that we have in this country, or even the anarchists, most of whom are equally pathetic. No, it would be entirely spontaneous. It would have to involve millions of people coming out onto the streets, like they're doing in Brazil, like they're doing in Egypt, in Tunisia, all over the world. That is the shape of revolution today, not the party seizing power. So in England, in Britain, or Wales, Scotland, the British Isles, that's how it would happen. You'd have to have millions of people, probably starting off with a few thousand, but millions of people out on the streets on a daily basis, discussing politics, discussing how they're going to get rid of the system, in factories, in schools, in universities, on estates, and in the streets. Every day and every night, en masse. It would have to really grip the nation. That's how I see revolution developing, right? But that by itself is not enough. It would have to be accompanied by occupations of buildings. Now, we've got tens of thousands of buildings here in London that are completely empty, that have been built for the rich, and we've got like hundreds of thousands of people that are homeless. So we'd have to seize property. We would have to seize property en masse. We'd have to seize factories, schools, everything. When I say we, I mean us, the people. It has to be done by millions of people, not a small elite. Otherwise, it's a coup d'etat, a leftist revolution, and will inevitably end up going wrong and will be probably to our detriment. What could cause a revolution in this country? Could it be a general strike? I don't think so, because the unions are completely emasculated. It could be a spontaneous uprising by the working class, but not at the point of production. will be on the streets, and they have to be joined by millions and millions of people that are becoming disenfranchised by the hundreds of thousands every month because of economics, because their wages are falling to nothing, because they can no longer afford to pay their mortgages, their rents, because they freeze or eat in the winter if they happen to be old age pensioners. Tunisia and the whole of the sort of Middle East revolution, which has just started, it hasn't finished, it's just started, happened when some guy that used to sell fruit on the streets, a street peddler, was blackmailed by the police, had to pay the police protection money, and then had to pay the council officials protection money. And then he was in despair, and he set fire to himself and killed himself as a protest. And this sparked off the Tunisian revolution, which has spread to Egypt and so on. So it could be one little tiny irrelevant thing that wouldn't even be mentioned in the newspapers that will start off a revolution. And that's what will happen here. It could be anything. It could be, for example, a couple of old age pensioners found frozen to death in their flat because they couldn't afford to heat it. That they have a funeral, that people turn out, and they turn it into a demonstration, that the police attack the demonstration, that there's a big protest about it. It spreads all over the country. It's just when everybody is fed up and gets out on the streets and keeps out on the streets and pushes it further. And it's got nothing to do with electing a left-wing Labour government or anything like that. It's against all politics. And it would have to involve a lot of people that today we would call reactionary. People that read the Sun and the Daily Mail, even people that go on EDL marches. They would have to come out on the streets and say, we've had enough. It's got nothing to do with Bulgarian immigrants and so on. It's all got to do with our ruling class. It's all got to do with the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, the bureaucracy, the aristocrats, the monarchy. A real revolution would have to, in England, would have to start attacking the monarchy. Because if you don't attack the monarchy, then you can't get rid of deference, and you'll never have a revolution. Yeah, you might have riots, and you might have occupations, you might have barricades, but everybody will just go home, and in 6 months' time they'll be waving the Union Jack. The nearest feeling we've had to revolution was when the students a couple of years ago stormed the Tory party headquarters and wrecked it. And then for several weeks were out on the streets confronting the police. Brilliant. That is what a revolution will feel like in microcosm. It only involved maybe 10,000 people. But a revolution would involve millions of people, and the more people that are involved, the less violence there will be, because obviously there wouldn't be enough police to control it, because we would obviously be all together. And yeah, we'll be disagreeing, but the main thing is to overthrow society and overthrow everything. You talk about the monarchy, look at the Queen, look at the royal family. They have tens of thousands of acres of land. They have like dozens of castles. They've got 7 or 8 palaces. They own vast swathes of the country. Every single brick, every single blade of grass would have to be confiscated in a revolution. And we'd have to desire it, and we'd have to do it, and we'd have to disenfranchise the 1%. And also those that wanted to defend the 1%. We are the vast majority. If only we could get it together and do it. It's better to do it than fail than it is to not do it and just go under. And most of us are going under, not only in England but all over the world. The rich are getting richer. The powers are getting more arrogant. The need for revolution is more screaming at every moment. So we need mass meetings on a daily basis, and arguments and discussions and occupations and barricades. Yeah, and there will be violence. There will be violence, obviously, seizing the property of the rich is violence. Maybe, when they try to evict us, there might be violence. There might be people killed. But you look at it this way. Yeah, there are people killed in revolutions. But you look at it this year, there's probably be tens of thousands of people this year, old age pensioners and poor people, that are going to freeze to death because they cannot afford to pay their bills. There's going to be hundreds, if not thousands of people committing suicide because they're in despair, because they've lost their jobs, because they've got no hope of work, because they cannot live on their wages, because they're being abused. We're talking about tens of thousands of people, and these are the casualties, never mind the people that have been slaughtered in hospitals, as we now know, by the thousand, the people that are ignored, the kids that are abused and so on. It adds up every year to tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people that needlessly die. So don't talk to me about violence in revolution. The real violence is the violence of the society that we live in. And unless we overthrow it through a revolution, as I've described, and I've just described the first phase of a revolution, because you've got to get out in the streets and you've got to do it first, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do afterwards. Unless you do that, you've got nothing. And we're going to be continuous victims, and it's going to carry on like this, and it's going to get worse. So, let's do it. I can't do it. The anarchists can't do it. It's up to you out there, millions and millions of people. People watching this, well, maybe a few hundred of people watching this. You're the people going to make it. Your parents, your brothers, your sisters, the people you work with, your family, your lovers, everybody. We've all got to, it's got to be a mass thing. Otherwise, if it's done by a party, or we place our hopes in saviours, dictators, no matter how nice they are, no matter how flowery they are, they're all going to end up bastards. So it's up to us to make the revolution. And that is what I mean by revolution. As I've described, the beginning of revolution. It's got nothing to do with mysticism. It's got nothing to do with esoterica or anything like that. That's how I envisage a revolution in this country. It's not going to come from anarchists, leftists, or anything like, or trade unions or anything like that. It's going to come from the masses themselves, who are the vast majority of the people. It's that or nothing.